There's an almost unspoken level of excitement that accompanies every Marvel film. Their trailers gain millions of views regardless of the characters they depict, and they are consistently among the highest grossing films each year. Who knows how long that will last, but Marvel's ubiquitous popularity doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. And the reason I bring up Marvel is because at the moment, they're the antithesis of DC. If the MCU is so successful, why isn't the DCEU? And to understand DCEU's weaknesses is to know the MCU's strengths. But I want to focus on what I think is the most important key to why the MCU works and DCEU doesn't, and that's the understanding of their characters. Ever since Robert Downey Jr. graced our screens as the now iconic Tony Stark, birthing the MCU, it was clear that Kevin Feige and company had a clear understanding of what made Iron Man so great. That would continue with each passing film, and it would quickly become clear that Marvel knew exactly what it was they were doing, and had an obvious plan for the future, unlike the DCEU where everything seems to be reactionary based on receptions, both critical and financial. But all of that planning wouldn't amount to anything if Marvel didn't know who these characters were. That Tony is an egotistical jackass with a heart of gold, that Bruce Banner is a tortured soul constantly worrying about the monster within him, and that Steve Rogers will always do the right thing regardless of the consequences. And more recently, the Russo brothers displayed a deft hand at juggling all these characters, plus adding in the MCU's version of Spider-Man, which quickly became the definitive on-screen interpretation of the character. I had tears in my eyes seeing Peter and Tony interact with one another, not only because it truly felt like Peter was being brought to life in a way that he was always meant to be, but because it was like a scene ripped straight from the comics. These larger-than-life characters playing off one another, and it feeling absolutely right, all because, again, the MCU knows who these characters are, but the same cannot be said about the DCEU. You don't even have to watch the movies within the DCEU to know that Zack Snyder and his cohorts don't understand these characters on a fundamental level. He referred to Superman's killing of Zod as growing up the character, implying that the character was just a shameful, childish fantasy until he got his hands on him. He also stated that Batman murdering criminals was fine so long as it was sort of done indirectly. This, coupled with changing Joker to make him cool, spoiler alert, he isn't, rather than respecting him as a character, the cast and crews saying they made the films for the fans when, as a fan of DC, that couldn't be further from the truth, and the most recent comments of producer Deborah Snyder saying that the reason behind Superman's brooding, moody persona is because they think it makes him more relatable. And it's no wonder as to why the DCEU is in trouble. Superman is a person that longs to belong but knows he can't, but that doesn't stop him from doing what's right. In essence, he's a lot like the MCU's Captain America, and when Marvel is doing Superman better than DC is, you know something's drastically wrong. Making one of the brightest characters in all of comics needlessly dark and depressing doesn't make him more relatable. It makes him disappointing. And it isn't limited to the heroes. The villains have suffered on DC's side of things as well. Lex Luthor is depicted as an awkward psychopath that pees in jars. The Joker feels like a gangster that's trying way too hard to convince everyone that he really is the Joker. And these are two of the greatest villains in any medium, not just comics. Lex Luthor is one of the smartest men on the planet, and he's driven to rid the world of Superman not because he's insane, but because he honestly believes humanity is better off without him. And there's a bit of jealousy that plays into that as well, as Lex wishes humanity looked up to him in the same way they look up to Superman. And The Dark Knight showed us, and of course the comics as well, that Joker isn't as crazy as he wants everyone to think he is. He doesn't just do things, there's always a purpose and an end game. He just disguises that under his deeply disturbing persona. And he does not love Harley Quinn, no matter what Suicide Squad and David Ayer would have you believe. He views her as just another one of his thugs, and he uses her and manipulates her for his own means. It's the core of their relationship that he's an abusive monster that has manipulated Harley into thinking he cares for her, but Suicide Squad depicts them as a happy couple. It portrays the core of the relationship upon which it was founded. It's maddening. And sure, while Marvel's track record hasn't been the greatest regarding villains either, they've still given us amazing characters like Loki, Winter Soldier, and Baron Zemo, and that's more than DCEU has come close to accomplishing. So what happens next? It's anyone's guess. As a DC fanboy, this hurts the most. These characters mean the world to me, and they mean the world to a lot of people, but until the DCEU can employ people that genuinely care about these characters and understand them on a fundamental level, and signs point to that may be happening, but don't get your hopes up just yet. The DCEU will always and forever live in the shadow of the MCU. But perhaps the most tragic thing to me is that we've seen what can happen when the right people are in charge of these properties, and they aren't ashamed of who these characters are. And more importantly, they understand them and what makes them so great. We can hope, and I don't want to stop hoping, but it'd be ignorant to believe something isn't seriously wrong with WB's DC universe. Here's to hoping they can fix it.
I'd buy that for $1.
Oh, there it is.